Well, hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, December 14th, 2016, and this is our Aspire Open Learning event. The topic of our call today is how to take the stress out of relationships. And what we are going to do is we're going to talk about boundaries, so that you can see that model up there on the screen. But what I would like each one of you to do is think about one person who causes stress that you're in a relationship with that causes stress. Now, there are some ground rules that we're going to follow today, and one of the ground rules is you're never going to tell us the name of the person. And the second ground rule, and you're going to notice this is going to be hard, and some people are going to slip every once in a while, but the second ground rule is that you're not going to say the details of how this person drives you nuts. Because if you start talking about it, your energy is going to get up, and you're just going to want to say this and this and this, because you're just going to get caught up in it again. And it was kind of funny, and we were laughing about it this morning in the in-person one about how that happens. So the reason we're not going to allow that to happen is because if we do, someone's going to start talking, and then it's going to the whole conversation is going to be hijacked onto that person's story. But also there's a better reason, and the better reason is if you can remove yourself from the story of that person and what they're doing to you or what the relationship with them is like, then we're able to, as a group, see a pattern. And the patterns are going to help us. So we're going to start by going around the room, and I'm going to go in this order. I'm going to go Angela, and then Jackie, and then I will go Robin, and then Elaine. And then if anybody else jumps on the call, we will have them in at the end. And when it's your turn, I don't want you to tell me the name of the person that you're thinking of, but what I want you to do is try to only articulate. I don't want you to tell me what the person does or the behaviors that bother you, but I want you to tell me, when I think about this person, what thoughts and feelings come up. So I want you to try to describe the thoughts and feelings. So you're going to use one person this whole class as your reference point. Now, for the rest of you who aren't on at the moment, what you're going to do is listen to everybody, and what they say are their thoughts and feelings related to the people. And what I want you to listen for are patterns. Like, what do we have in common with all of these people that are causing us stress in some way? And are you seeing anything different? And we don't want you to jump to why either. We don't want to analyze why the person behaves the way they do. We just want to talk about, how do I think and how do I feel? So I'm going to start just to give you sort of a model of how I want you to try to do this. And if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. You don't have to do it perfectly. So the person that I'm using for this call, that I'm thinking about, when I think about this person, first of all, I think about them way more than I would normally want to think about them. And that is because I'm worrying about them. And what I worry about is them doing things that I don't think are right or safe for them to do, and I blame myself for not somehow influencing them better so that I could be sure that they aren't doing these things that are bad for them. So that's kind of my experience. So my feelings are anxiety and worry, but also self-recrimination. So a lot of, oh gosh, I wish, I must be doing something wrong, I could do something better, that type of thing. So that's sort of what I feel when I'm thinking about this person who causes me stress. And so we're going to go in this order. We're going to go Angela, Jackie, Robin, Elaine, and then anybody else who gets on the call. Okay? So, Angela, when you think about your person, what feelings come up and what thoughts come up?
When I think about this person, I guess the deepest level is like fear. Mm-hmm. Fear that it's not going to work out for me, that it's not going to be what I want. And I worry a lot about the future and things that haven't even happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to control the situation so that I can fend off any type of, future problems that haven't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel I try to analyze everything a little bit too much. Mm-hmm. And I try to study and learn and just try to think my way through it, because I know if I could just figure this out, there's a solution to every problem. So if I could just think of what the problem is and figure it out, then I'll be safe. And I try to have a lot of talks with this person, and I try to reason with them. And if I think maybe I'm not being clear, so I'll retell it. And just really go over it a lot and real intense and real worried. And then the monkey mind happens, and I can't stop thinking. And I just, I just drive myself crazy because I'm trying to control someone, and you just can't do that. And that's how everything goes crazy, because I can't control another person, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. Well, I'm already noticing that there are things in common with both you and I and the person that we're thinking of, right? So we both have fear, worry, anxiety type things. We both think about it way more than we want to be thinking about it, and we're both trying to figure out ways that we can control their behavior or at least make things work in a certain way. So we'll continue to look for patterns as we share. Each of us shares our experience and throws it into the mix. So Jackie, what about you? Jackie, if you're talking right now, you are on mute, so you may want to unmute yourself, which I believe.
I'm here.
There you go. Okay, there you are.
Okay, so when I think of the person who causes me stress, I have a feeling of disappointment, a feeling of not being listened to, and which leads to me thinking that I must not be an effective communicator, because clearly they didn't understand me, which then leads to like the 7 stages of grief or whatever, leads to anger. Anger at what I perceive to be either additional things that I'm going to have to do to make up for it, or lost opportunity and risk that has been created because this person is either that's doing or doing something that I didn't think was appropriate or not what I thought we had agreed to. So that's kind of my list of things. Does that respond to it?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. And again, we notice, the deep feelings, fear, anxiety, but now we're going to be adding grief and anger and I don't know if you said resentment or not.
Yeah,
but
that's there.
And that's there. And then the feeling of being unheard, that came up a lot this morning in the in-person session, not feeling heard. And then some people would say that as a result of not feeling heard, or maybe not feeling respected, then what would happen is they would start doubting themselves. And you had also said kind of like that self-recrimination, like maybe I'm not a good communicator if I'm not being heard. So commonalities everywhere. So thank you, Jackie.
Okay.
So Robin, what about you? When you think about your person, what feelings and thoughts come up?
Actually, I'm going between 3 people trying to figure out, can I do it all about them? But I can't, because they're all so different scenarios. But so I picked one. I picked one. As I was hearing everybody, I can totally relate. I do question myself, did I make the right decision with this person? And I don't know without going into detail, but questioning my decision capabilities, questioning my managerial capabilities, questioning how other people see me, for not taking more action about the situation, how I'm viewed by others. Very frustrated, angry, overanalyzing, how I can make the situation better. I think those are the main categories. And blaming, blaming myself. It's my fault. I shouldn't be in this role.
Lots of commonalities there. Thank you. And Elaine, welcome to the call.
Hi.
Hi. So when you think about your person, what feelings and thoughts come up? Oh, I think Elaine just got cut off. So we're going to let her try to get back on, and I'll talk until it sounds like she's back on again. But let me just open it up. Ah, that might be her. Elaine?
Yeah, I think I accidentally hung up. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I hit the phone button, and I think it was red, so I think I hung up on you.
Yeah, but you're back?
Can we all see each other or no?
No, I think you're the only one. This is what most people are seeing is the screen.
Yes, I have the slides.
Okay.
Okay. So, okay, I would say in this relationship, my thoughts are, hold on just one second. I'm in here on the phone, guys. Okay. Kids just came home. I would say what my thoughts are about this person, or the thoughts I have when I'm engaging with them.
The thoughts you have when you think about them and your emotions when you think about them.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm struggling going between two people, one that I don't need to have interaction with and one that I do. So I'll go with the person that I do. My thoughts about them is really when I'm not around them, I really don't have thoughts about them because I'm not near them, and they're, 6-hour drive away, and I don't have to see them regularly, and the conversation is on the phone. So it can be very controlled, and I feel okay. When I'm in person with them, I feel judged and not enough, and just questioned on my parenting, on my actions, just on everything. I feel like I'm wearing kid gloves. I have to be very careful about what I say, and I'm very careful about what I respond in the way that I respond, because I think that person can easily sway my feelings one way or another. So I'm very careful in what I say, how I ask for things. I'm very guarded, I would say, which is not usually like me. I talk very slow. I have to think things through. If the person says something that bothers me or hits a nerve, I have to take a deep breath and I walk away. I say I have to use the restroom and I go off, and then I come back and she's usually forgotten about it. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel. And the behavior. The behavior would be the nervousness, the making sure I don't say the wrong thing to upset that person, still being respectful, but also having my personal boundaries, making sure that I'm not being disrespected.
So let me ask you this. Do you feel drained by this person? Because I got the sense that, kind of when you're not with this person in the same room, everything's kind of okay.
Well, yeah, because I'm not near that person. But when I'm with that person, I feel drained. And I also feel, the word, it's like judged, like my business, and I'm always trying to guard the business, and in the business with, if that person's at my house, they'll look for things to, like, I don't know, flipping my calendar over and asking me about a wedding that's hidden behind something. Like, why do you care about that? Like, you don't know that person. Why are you asking me about that person? It just comes off as very, like, there's no boundary on that person's side.
It sounds like it feels invasive to you.
It does feel invasive. And, like, just a lot of different things. The questions come out of the blue, and I have to constantly ask. And I've learned to say, why do you ask? Because, it's like she mentioned something about our neighbors and do they have any furniture. I said, I'm not sure. Why do you ask? because I went over there and I peered in their front window and it doesn't look like they have curtains up and they have no furniture. I'm like, I just don't even know what to say. I'm like, seriously? Yeah. I just let that go. But it's that busybody, like, oh, and she's getting married at the Ritz. I'm like, really? Yeah, no. And then years later, she will ask about people that I am no longer in touch with. Well, what happened to her? Well, what's it? I am not sure. I don't know. We weren't that great of friends in the beginning. I don't know why you were asking her about all that earlier. Anyway, she was at a birthday party for a 1-year-old. I haven't seen her since. So it's those kinds of things.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Honestly, I don't know where it comes from or what the intent is. I'm not sure that she means it in harm. I don't know. I think she's just a busybody.
Yeah. So we're not gonna analyze why yet. But do you notice that when you start talking about it, you know, it's like one thing and then another thing and then another example. Yeah, you get all wired up talking about it.
And see, that's why you said not to give examples. But there are, and notice that they stick in my mind for years.
Yeah, you just get caught up. So there's two things I want to thank you for. One is giving a drained experience, because I think most of us gave the anxious end of the spectrum. So that's a good example of someone who drains. And the thing is, if we get caught up in the stories, any one of us, our energy will start up like that, because we'll think of one example and then another example and then another example, and it'll just go on.
Now I'm thinking negatively of her, but she hasn't done anything wrong recently, so it's just, and my husband is like, you got to let it go, but it's like, well, it shouldn't have happened in the first place, and it's wrong, and it's also, it doesn't do anybody any good, and I need to learn to manage it, which is why I'm on the call. I don't think I
Right, so that's what we're going to go on, that's what we're going to do now. So what I'm going to ask is for all of you to put yourself on mute for a bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this model that we have here in front of us, okay? So first of all, I want to share a little bit about what I noticed in common about what you all said, and so that we can talk about what it feels like. So did you notice, and we kind of had a little bit of a disproportion. So most of us, the people that we thought of caused us stress in the way that we were sort of worried about their behavior, and but we didn't feel heard. There were certain behaviors that the person was doing that we couldn't really control, and they were harming us in some way. But then at the other end of the spectrum, these people can sometimes be so exhausting that we just want to get away from them. The first thing I want you to take a look at, and I'm going to have to not see who's on the call right now so I can look at this model. So the first thing I want you to have a look at is this boundaries model. Notice that it's a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, your feelings are going to be more anxiety-ridden, and you're going to do a lot more worrying and thinking about it when the person's not around. On the other end of the spectrum, you're going to kind of want to get away from the person, and so when they're not around, you're not going to be thinking about them, kind of like Elaine's example. You're not going to be thinking about them much when they're not around. But when they are around, you're really going to want to get away from them, because they're just causing you a lot of, just negative feelings. But then I've had many people say I am on both sides of the spectrum at the same time. And so I want you to know up front that you can be on both sides of the spectrum on time. And usually when you have what we're going to call messy boundaries, you're on both sides of the spectrum. So first, I want to explain this model, and then we're going to start applying it to our people, so that when you leave today, you should have a couple of ideas of things that you can do to shift the dynamic. So let's take a look at the model here. The first thing I want to say about boundaries in general was something that we were sort of talking about before the recording went on, and that was that there's not a lot out there that gives us a good explanation of boundaries. We hear about boundaries a lot. Boundaries are talked about in conversations a lot. And the main thing that is often, difficult is that how do you really get your hands around what boundaries are and understand it? And when I first started hearing about boundaries, when I started my coaching training about 15 years ago, I really didn't feel like I had a clear understanding. So I looked and looked and looked, and there wasn't anything really good on it. But the best example that I found was something on the internet which talked about responsibility. And so the best way to think about boundaries is that having clean boundaries is when I am responsible for my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and you are responsible for your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And most of the time, when there are boundaries issues, they tend to be either parent-child issues or leader, like boss-employee issues. And the reason is because it's a lot easier to kind of have a clean feeling about not being responsible for somebody else's behavior, thoughts, or feelings when they are a peer than when they are a boss or a parent or when you're supposedly technically responsible for them. So when you're a parent of a young child, it's really hard to say I'm not responsible for that child's behavior because you kind of are responsible for that child's behavior. And the same thing with a boss and a team. It's kind of hard to say, well, I'm not responsible for the team because kind of if the team screws up, it is me. So the one other thing to know about boundaries is even though we have kind of a tangible explanation here, it's a model that helps you understand it, but it is filled with nuance. So what I'm hoping to share with you is more guidelines so that you can feel out the nuance in the model. You are going to experience boundaries issues, so getting your head around it will only give you a limited understanding of it. The only way to really understand boundaries is to be in different relationships, and in those different relationships, think about where the boundary lines are. And the way you're going to be able to tell that you have clean boundaries is by the way that you feel in your relationship. So if you're in a relationship and you feel free to be yourself, free to pretty much say whatever comes to mind, and you also enjoy being with that person, being with the person maybe energizes you or at least is pretty neutral. It doesn't drain you. So you feel free to be yourself and you don't feel drained by the person and you don't feel worried about the person, then you have pretty clean boundaries. Now your boundaries can shift in one relationship based on different situations. So you can have a person in your life that you have clean boundaries with, but then some situation comes up and it kind of rocks you one direction or the other. And so that's pretty normal too. So let's talk about this spectrum. So if you look at the spectrum, we're asking the question, who is responsible in a relationship for each other's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? And I am going to ask somebody to come off mute and give me an example of a person that fits the category of way down on this end of the spectrum, which if those of you who can't see the screen, I'm circling the you end of the spectrum. So you are responsible for my thoughts, you are responsible for my feelings, you are responsible for my behavior. A very extreme instance. So who can give me an example of that? Anybody? I'm just going to sit here till somebody speaks up.
So, are you asking? You're asking when is someone else responsible for my thoughts, feelings, or behavior?
No, I'm asking you to try to think of a person that, or a person or a situation where you've seen somebody on the you end of the boundary spectrum where they were blaming everybody else for their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Can you think of an example?
I have an example I can share with staff member, where you offer feedback and critique, and they get frustrated and blame you for how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
They get angry, they get upset because they've made mistakes, and you have to make the hard call on, do I share this, do I not, and how do I do this so that they don't walk away feeling bad. But if there's issues that they have internally that aren't related probably to what's going on with you and them, they can sometimes, I think, feel blame you because you're the ones that make them feel frustrated, and you're the one that, I guess makes them angry and upset because they make the mistakes.
Yeah.
Especially if somebody who makes mistakes a lot, like quality errors in work, and you call out and call out and call out, and it's like, you're the one that makes me do this. You're the one that makes me make these mistakes, etc. So anyways, I just thought I'd throw it out.
That's a great example. These are the people who are miserable, or, it could only be in the moment, but it's everybody else's fault. So they're going to use, what we said in the workshop this morning, the example that was given in the workshop is listen for people's language. They'll use the word, they'll say, you make me, you made me feel bad, you upset me, you caused me to do this. Or the parent that's kind of driving the car, don't make me come back there, right? You made me mad. Or these are the employees at the water cooler who are bitching about management, excuse my language. They're saying, oh, yeah, they never do, blah, blah, blah. They never do that. So that's like they're always complaining about the man. These people complain and complain and complain and complain, and you look at them and you hear them complaining, and inside you're thinking, okay, well, there's a lot you can do to fix that, but they're not taking ownership of fixing it. Okay, so that's an example of what you might observe in someone who's at the far extreme end of the you end of the spectrum. So now let's look at the far extreme end of the me spectrum. Does anyone have an example of that, like someone that you may have noticed or observed that seems to be at the far end of the me spectrum, which means they seem to be taking responsibility for everyone else's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors?
This is Angela. I'm thinking about codependent people who take care of their spouses who, need help because they drink. So they take care of them and make sure that they're safe and take the call when the boss calls, like, why aren't you at work? And they just kind of feel sorry for them and do for them what they should be doing for themselves.
Exactly. That is a great example. And in fact, codependency, in its very definition, has something to do with being way over on the me side of the spectrum around someone who's not taking care of themselves, which is, the alcoholic usually, or the drug addict or whatever. So great example. Okay, let's talk about the gradations here. All right, so what I want you to notice is the healthy zone in the middle here. So this is a spectrum. It's not black and white. So most of you, if you're going to err one direction or another on the spectrum of responsibility, I'm going to guess you're going to err on the me end, which is probably why we had so many examples there. But most of you but that doesn't mean you're not going to experience the you end as well. But if you're going to err one way or the other, you're going to tend more to err on the me end. And the reason is because people on the me end are interested in self-improvement because they're always taking responsibility for everything. So they want to kind of constantly improve themselves. But people on the me end are very aware of how their behavior impacts others. They're very aware of how other people might feel towards them or what's going on with other people. So they're very focused on other people, and they're very kind of aware of what's going on with other people. Now, in the healthy zone, we're going to call that awareness and compassion. So there is nothing wrong with being aware of the impact of your behavior on other people. In fact, that's actually really, really healthy. there's also nothing wrong with having compassion for how others may be feeling. So you're a boss and you have to give somebody negative feedback, and you want to deliver it in a way that's not going to be hurtful. There is nothing wrong with that. But if you slide along the spectrum a little bit and you get to this over-empathizing place, that's when you're the boss and you need to give somebody negative feedback, but you're too afraid to give the feedback because you're afraid they'll crumble. And because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, you're starting to do extra work for them because you don't want to give them work that you don't feel they're capable of doing. And then when you get to the extreme end of the spectrum, you're just doing it all. You're doing it all for everybody, and you're trying to control the whole shebang. Now, how does this show up, though, to somebody outside, right? So the person that is feeling this way, they're feeling like they can't count on anybody. They're feeling like they can't trust, and they're feeling like if anything's going to get done, they have to be the one to do it. That's what they're feeling like on the inside. But how do other people feel with somebody like this? Anyone have any ideas?
I would say not empowered.
Mm-hmm.
This is Elaine.
Yes.
I would say not empowered because, and also not confident because I realized, especially with kids, like I have to, maybe this is not a right example, but I'll give it anyway. So my children wanted to walk to school, and they were driving each other crazy in the morning, and I talked to the school counselor, and I said, okay, what do I do? And she said, well, are they ready to go to school? I said, yeah, there was a lot of bickering. So the oldest one is bickering with the youngest. And she said, what's the issue? And I said, because he's not ready to go. She said, how old is the oldest? I said, 5th grade. She said, well, why does he walk by himself? I'm thinking, oh, why didn't I think of that? And then the second thing was I was a little nervous, but I had to, and they wanted to walk to school. I thought, okay, I'm a little nervous about them walking to school, but it's going to alleviate the bickering in the morning. And lo and behold, they walked to school. I was very nervous. And the first day, right around the time when I thought I should have been starting to worry, they actually showed up because it was a minimum day and I forgot. So it was good because they felt empowered. Mm-hmm. That's a good example because by not micromanaging, it gave them the confidence to feel like they could get themselves to school, and now they do it all the time, and everybody won, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of feeling nervous, like something's going to happen to them, but in any case, maybe as a boss, like, oh, it's not going to get done. Well, yeah, it might not get done the way you would do it, but if you can gently correct them in a way that they can actually get it done, those are things that we can let go of, and it empowers the employee to want to do even more, is what I think.
Exactly.
At it relieves you of feeling like you're the person that has to do everything because you're only going to get burnt out.
Exactly.
And you're not going to get all your work done because you're doing all this minutia. But if you can let it go, and maybe it'll take them a little bit longer in the beginning, then they're going to feel more empowered. They'll want more work. They'll do better. They want to be praised, and praise them and say, you did a great job. We can improve on this, but it's a fantastic start. They feel good.
Yes, exactly. So the person on this end of the spectrum, the way they come across to other people is as a micromanager often. So they come across as a controller and a micromanager. So that's this end of the spectrum. So now let's go to this other end of the spectrum because I want to make sure that we get through to all this. I'm trying to keep an eye on time here. So if you're in the middle of the spectrum here, one great thing about not taking on other people's thoughts and feelings is that you're not as worried about other people's opinions of you. And so people who are a little bit more on this end of the spectrum tend to have a little bit more confidence. And when I say allowing, what I mean is they allow other people to have negative opinions about them. So while many people who are on this end of the spectrum, and I'm moving my cursor back and forth, and I don't know how many of you can see it because you're not may not be watching on the screen, so I'm moving my cursor back to the me end of the spectrum here. People who are on the me end of the spectrum tend to worry about other people's opinions of them and try to manage. I remember me trying to manage, okay, people don't have to like me, but I can't have people not like me. So I've just got to manage everybody so that nobody doesn't like me. And that's a lot of managing, but also what it does as a leader and how it hurts you as a leader is if you have to make a decision and you never are going to have as much information as you need as a leader to make a decision. So you can't control whether or not you're going to always make good decisions. So you may make decisions that have negative impact on people. And a leader may choose not to make a decision because they're afraid of who it might hurt. And so a leader that's a little bit more confident and a little bit more, people are going to give me a lot of backlash for this decision. If people are going to give a lot of backlash for a decision, they may not make it. But if you're more on the confidence and allowing other people to have a negative opinion, what that means is you're okay kind of sitting through a day or a week with someone not liking you. You're okay observing that someone might be mad at you for a while. You're okay with that, and you can allow it, which means you may be better at making decisions. But now let's move down the spectrum. Right? So, these people are better at making decisions and making hard choices and allowing things to blow over. So this is the healthy version. We move down the spectrum to what I'm going to call offloading. Offloading are the people who are unaware of how their behavior is impacting others, and it doesn't seem like they care. So they're the ones that are on a project with you, a shared project with you, and everyone has to contribute, but you can't do your job before I do my job, but I wait till the last minute to do my job so you don't have any time left to your job, and I seem oblivious to it, like I don't even think about it. So that's the offloading. And then the blaming we already talked about, which is like the people at the water cooler. So what I want to do right now is go around the room, and I'm going to go in the same order I did before, but I want you to think about your person. And again, because we want to get through the call in the full hour, and I want you to leave with some gems, I want you to each, if you have a question that you'd like to ask me about this model that will help you kind of understand your person a little bit better, or maybe how you can deal with your situation, ask it. But try to refrain from giving any specific examples unless I ask, because the process of giving the examples is going to start taking a lot of our time up. And I want to make sure that we give everybody a chance and we are able to zero in on their issues. So we're going to do the same order. We're going to go Angela, and then Jackie, and then Robin, and then Elaine. And then if you don't have any question, that's fine. You can pass. You don't have to share it. But we're just, that question is going to add to the richness of our discussion.
I have that noise, sweetie, because I'm going to be unmuted.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was muted.
Okay.
A 7-year-old in the room. I'm trying to keep him quiet. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So, Angela, you want to start?
So I'm definitely on the me side. I guess in some cases, depending on, if you're not as close to me, I can be on the other side. But if I'm, for my close people, I'm on the me side. But the question is, how do you detach but still stay like loving and in there with them? That's like my question. How do you go to that middle?
Great. That's such a great question.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking you guys to ask questions, because every time you ask a question, you're going to take us in more richly into this conversation. So let's look at the spectrum. What if we're at the me spectrum? Now, the thing is the people on the me spectrum, the solution, think of this as a seesaw, okay? So if I'm taking on all the responsibility, I'm sitting on the seesaw, and this person's way up at the top, so I'm taking the responsibility. Well, if I just get off the seesaw, what's going to happen? It's just going to crash, right? We know, and I've worked with a lot of leaders who have been way over here on the me side, and they're trying to empower everybody else and build a culture of ownership, but it is really hard to let go. And the reason it's hard to let go is because you know if you let go, they're going to screw it up. And you can't stand the consequence of them screwing it up. So what we do first of all, step one, is build our own awareness of what's happening here. So that's what this model is so good for. It helps build the awareness. So that's step one. But now step two, you can start doing something about it. So once you started noticing, oh yeah, I'm on the me end, I'm taking more responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Now it's like, well, how do I get it back in balance? Well, I can't abdicate. And the reason I can't abdicate, I was working with a guy who had a bunch of employees in a shop using highly dangerous machinery, and they weren't following the safety things, and he was micromanaging them, and they were resenting it and pushing back on him, and we had a really horrible culture going there. But if he let go, someone was going to get their hand cut off because they weren't following the safety guidelines. So often it is very, very dangerous to just let go. What you have to do is follow steps, and Elaine sort of mentioned it with the word empower. You follow the steps of graduating empowerment. And like she thought about it and she let her kids walk to school by themselves, that was one step. So what you have to think about, and the good thing is you actually have to create scenarios where you can allow people to fail, and you have to assume that they're going to fail, but that it's going to be a learning experience for them. But it has to be a safe enough situation so you can handle them failing. And so I have a client that has a group of salespeople, and he was trying to get them to do all these sales calls and things, and they weren't doing them, and they weren't doing them, and they weren't doing them. And so he kept jumping in and doing all the sales for the company, but he's trying to get out of doing the sales function. So what he ended up doing is creating goals for them, and he allowed the revenue of the company to go down because he said, you know what, I've made all my money. It's not going to hurt me if the revenue of the company goes down. But I'm tying all their bonus to their goals. So what he did is he said, I'm here for you if you need me. I am happy to train you on anything you want. If you need help on anything, you come to me. These are your goals. If you think you can get to them, great, and these are your bonuses that you're going to get. And he decided that he could risk the revenue of the company going down and them not making their bonuses. So it was a natural consequence for them that they had to experience, and it wasn't any skin off his back. And they failed, as expected, and he separated himself. But then it was okay for them to go to the next step, which is, okay, now we have something that we can learn from. But if they were never allowed to fail, then they would have never believed that they needed the training. So it's time after time after time. When you have children, you're not, or like, let's say you have a dog that you're training. I used this example this morning. And you want to train them to stay with you off the leash. So I take my dog for a walk. I'm afraid to let her off the leash because I think she's going to run into the street and get hit by a car. But what I can do is I can take her to the dog park, which is fenced in, and I can let her off the leash there. And I can see if she'll come to me or stay. And I can practice those things with her not being on the leash. And then maybe I can take her to a bigger park as long as I know that it's fenced in. So if she runs, she's not going to run away too far. Maybe I'll take her to a place where there's no busy roads nearby and there are no gates next, and so she can run, and I see if she can keep being trusted to come back to me. And only then do I start taking her on walks and taking her off the leash then. Okay? So that's a great question. Angela, do you feel like I've answered it a little bit?
Oh, yeah. That's great. Baby steps.
Baby steps. Okay, great. Jackie, what about you? As you are thinking about this, what question comes up that might help us explore this deeper?
Well, I'm looking at it and I'm feeling like I'm watching a tennis match here because I'm going back between me and you. When I started out explaining my thoughts and feelings, I felt like I was very much on the you side because I was offloading feelings of being disappointed and angry and feeling ineffective, like the relationship was defining my feelings. I was blaming, but I realized that's not what I am because I end up doing a lot of the rescuing and picking up the. So am I misunderstanding sort of the me and you? Because I see, or is it just a matter of I'm bouncing between? I go from the being angry or disappointed or some kind of negative set of feelings that I attribute to the other person, and then, but then I compensate. I go way, swing all the way through the middle to the other side and pick up the pieces and overcompensate. So
what you just did was give us an eloquent explanation of how we can be on both ends of the spectrum at the same time. Okay. And that exactly is how it shows up. So it usually shows up where you're starting on the me side. You're starting out with kind of expectations, but then you can't control someone's behavior, so they exhibit behavior that actually has a really negative impact on you. Mm-hmm. And so it starts to hurt and disappoint you in some way. And so, of course, you're going to be angry and upset. And all those feelings you're going to attribute to that person because that person's behavior is what triggered all those feelings. But then because you can't trust them, you go back to the me end. So it is a tennis match. And you described it really well. So let's talk about what to do, though, if you find yourself in a tennis match. So what you do if you find yourself in a tennis match is a little bit of a dual approach. So the first thing is you have to pay attention to how the person's hurting you in some way, right? And we set boundaries in, we have to look at both our unmet needs and our boundaries. So unmet needs is like a whole different class. We do that work at Aspire, and we may do it in a learning event at some point in the future next year. But the succinct thing about needs is needs are insatiable, and usually what happens when we're at the you part of the spectrum is that we are experiencing unmet needs, and in our mind, the only person who should meet those needs is this one person who is failing miserably at it. Mm-hmm. And that is very common, and it happens all the time with unmet needs. So first of all, if you're experiencing that, you need to know that you're not alone. We all have this. There are a lot of sort of general rules about unmet needs, but the most important rule that I can share on this call is that if you have an unmet need, typically it feels insatiable, and typically you end up finding yourself inexorbitantly attracted to someone who can't meet that need. So you're going to always be kind of angry and resentful of that person because they're never giving it to you. But the good news is you can get your needs met, and you can get your needs met from other ways than that person. And that requires a real shift to really get that because that person is your boss, or because that person is your husband or your child or your parent, that they're the only person that can meet these needs. You can get the needs met, and when you get the needs met, it takes some of the charge out of the dynamic. It takes some of the disappointment out of it. And so what you're doing first, your first step when you're in the tennis match, is to protect yourself. And part of protecting yourself is starting to recognize what your unmet needs are and getting them met. And then the second part of protecting yourself is writing the rules for what behaviors you will and will not accept from the other person. And those rules can be anything, but they could be that they don't yell at you, or they don't dismiss you, or they don't demean you, or it can be a rule that when you talk they listen. So it can be whatever you want your rules to be. And the cycle is, step one, you get really, really clear on what your rules are. And you would be surprised. I have had so many clients just write their rules for how someone is allowed to interact with them. And in writing those rules, their behavior starts shifting, and the other person starts shifting in response without them even having to say anything. So just knowing the rules and being really clear on them somehow shifts your energy where you don't even have to have a conversation. But step two is actually having a conversation, usually when they cross the boundary, and letting them know what the rule is. So from now on, I want you to always listen to me when I talk. And so if it's not a good time for you to listen, you can let me know it's not a good time. But because I need to talk, you're going to make time for me within the next 4 hours or 8 hours, or you can make up whatever rule you want. but you have to think about what your needs are and what your rules are. And so step 2 is you communicate the boundary. Now, your expectation is you're going to have to communicate the boundary and hold them to the boundary a few times before they're trained, but people are trainable. So step 3 is they cross the line. And so step 3 is you have to think about the consequence that happens if they don't follow the rule, whatever the rule is. If the rule is to listen, if they don't listen, what is your consequence? And it has to be a consequence that you can easily and consistently exhibit. It might be as simple as leaving the room. It might be as simple as going over to a girlfriend's house and talking to her about it. It can be anything. And we have lots of examples in the in-person meeting today. But it doesn't matter what your rule is, but your consequence has to be easy. So you don't want to threaten to end a marriage or threaten to leave a company. Those are not consequences that are, those consequences are too extreme. You want to come up with a consequence that seems like I could really do this. So then step 4 is you actually, after you've communicated the consequence, the next time they cross the boundary, you do the consequence, and you do it very consistently, and you just keep doing it. So they always get the consequence every time they cross the boundary. But when they don't cross the boundary and they behave in the way that follows your rules, then they get the real you interacting with them. So that is the process that you go through on that end of the spectrum. What ends up happening is it sort of takes care of both ends of the spectrum if you work on getting the needs met and then you work on setting the boundaries. Okay. And nothing works 100% all the time with every person, but this stuff gets you closer to cleaner boundaries and they get you more relief in your relationship. So, Jackie, was that helpful?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Okay, great. So, Robin, what about you? What question comes up as you're thinking about this? And we're going to be, just to give you guys some timelines, if anyone has to get off early, you can, but I think that I'm going to need maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. We're at 2 minutes to 3 right now, but I might need 5 or 10 more minutes just to wrap it up for everyone. So if you can stay, I'd really appreciate it. That way we can have a nice ending round robin, but I promise I'll be off within like 10 minutes. So Robin, what about you? What question comes up for you?
I guess, if you could just maybe give a couple of examples of offloading and situations and how you go back into the middle from offloading.
That's a really great one. Thanks. So let's characterize offloading. So I would say that offloading is the person that is unaware of their impact on other people's behavior and doesn't seem to care about it. I had this this person in one of my groups who would, just say things that would just really rub people the wrong way. And then when she got the information that she had upset people, she would go, well, it's their job to make a request if they want me to behave differently. Or, she would just kind of, it just didn't seem like she was willing to take responsibility for the fact that her behavior had a negative impact. So for someone that's offloading, typically they're not going to be the one that moves themselves to the middle of the spectrum. Okay, they are, because if you're blaming or offloading, you're in victim mode, or you're in, just kind of stick it to the man mode, and you're not going to be trying to move yourself because you don't think there's anything wrong with what you're doing. But if you have someone who is offloading and you're trying to move them back into the middle, then there are 2 tools that you have. One is awareness and one is feedback. So the first thing you have to do is help them see the impact of their behavior on others without blaming them for it. So a lot of times people will blame other people because they don't want to be the one that's blamed, and they have issues with being blamed, so they're super sensitive to being blamed, which is why they blame everybody else, because they probably grew up with a lot of blame in their family. So we try to take blame off the table, and we just say, we talk about behaviors and we talk about impact. And what we do is we give them feedback on the impact that their behavior has on other people, and we make requests. And so I have a feedback tool. It's on the Aspire website. It is, right now, it's on there's a whole class and a worksheet, and it's free. It's an audio class. You can go into leadership, communication and giving feedback, and you can download the class, and it will walk you through the feedback tool. One of the most important parts of the feedback tool is we don't talk about blame, we don't talk about how somebody's being, but we say, this is your behavior, this is how it's impacting people, and this is my request of how you change your behavior, and we just talk about the behavior in terms of how effective or ineffective it is in terms of achieving our mutual purpose. So it's always nice to have a mutual purpose. We both want to achieve this that we can agree on, and then we say, okay, well, this behavior versus this behavior, and how do we weigh the two? Okay? So what I want to do, Robin, do you feel like that helps a little bit?
That helped a lot. Would you mind sharing the link you're talking about? I was trying to write it all down of where I could go to get that.
Yes, go to the Aspire website, and under the Leadership tab, look under Communication, and under the Communication tab, look under Giving Feedback.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Elaine, what about you? A question that you would like me to answer?
I don't know. I think that the question initially would have been, how do I address this with the person? But it came to not a knockdown drag out. It came to a head a couple of visits ago, and a comment was made, and I just got really frustrated. And, it just was, I'm like, you know what? I just have to say something. So I went in, and the person was in another room, and I said, I need to talk to you. And I said, when you say XYZ, I feel XYZ, and I don't like feeling XYZ. So I just wanted you to be aware that when you say that, the impact that you have on me is this. And this person said, I'm really surprised. I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. Can you give me an example? And I said, well, yeah. I said, we were at a place and crying was appropriate, and you made me feel like you came to the conclusion that I was crying because I didn't have a good relation. It was at a funeral. So you came to the conclusion that I was crying because I felt guilty. She said, you must have felt very guilty for not having a great relationship with that person. And I said, actually, that wasn't the case. So if that's your belief is wrong. And she said, well, I don't understand that. I said, well, I was crying because it impacted my children. It impacted my husband. I was sad for you. And then she said, well, I'm shocked that you don't feel guilty because of it. I said, so now you're saying that I should be feeling guilty. I'm not. I don't feel guilty because I went through this with my grandparents and this, that, and the other, and I said I wasn't going to put myself through that again. So I said, I don't appreciate it when you make comments to me that I should be feeling a certain way, almost like you're telling me I should feel that way when I don't need to. And then she said, well, it seems like you're awfully, and then I started crying, and I said, listen, it's clear that you don't like me. I understand that. I can't change that. That makes me sad, but there's nothing I can do about it. You are this to my children, you are this to that person. And then I said, it really, really hurts my feelings. I never said it made me feel. She never made me feel anything. It's her comments that do that and the behavior. So I said, it really hurts my heart when you say these things, and I want it to stop. And so she didn't have an answer, and I turned to leave the room, and she said under her breath, well, you didn't have to get so emotional about it. And I turned around and I said, that's exactly the kind of comment that you make all the time, and that is not okay for me. I am no longer tolerating you speaking to me that way. It's not okay. And she just didn't know what to say, And I said, I don't need to come here, and I won't, but that means my children won't come. If you're going to treat me this way, then my children are with me, and they're not coming either, and I would hate to have you miss out on that. And I said, it's not a threat. If I'm not comfortable here, I don't know what you say to them. So if you're speaking to me this way, I have to protect them. And you may not notice, but those things that you say to me in front of them have an impact on my children. Therefore, if it continues, they won't be here.
So that's your boundary right there that you set.
That was my boundary, yeah. And then she seemed suddenly to get it. I'm like, it's not okay. And she never apologized, but the behavior has changed. And I did not expect an apology. I don't think I'll ever get one. I don't care. All I wanted the, the language like that to stop and to be her breath.
Yeah.
And she still does it in a way, but
not so much.
Not so much. And I laugh it off.
Yeah.
It's like if there's a group of us around, and you know how women get when there's coffee everywhere. If we're somewhere, she'll say, "Is this your coffee over here getting cold?" Like with an edge to it, and I'll just say, "Actually, it's cooling off. Thank you for reminding me it's there. I'll come get it." And I
So it doesn't. Yeah, so it doesn't change the behavior 100%. But what I like about what you did is you did an authentic conversation. You got very, very clear about the behavior, and you got into specifics, and you set boundaries. And so what Elaine's story illustrates is, just a really good example of setting boundaries, but you can imagine how emotional that conversation was.
It was horrible, and it was like an hour long, and it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Crying, but I haven't had any issues since.
Yeah, get it. So that's the come to Jesus conversation.
And I was not going to tolerate it anymore. And I also said, you know what? I get that, and I didn't even say it. But I thought, you just lost somebody. I'm not going to. In my mind, I thought, you know what? She's going through something. I didn't give her a reason for it. I just thought, you know what? She's being a real bitch about this, and I am not allowing her to continue to treat me this way, because if I don't stop it now, it's at a point where it's impacting my kids. So
Okay. All right. Okay, good. So we have got about 2 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is go around really quick with just the rest of you. So thank you, Elaine, and then we'll go Robin, and then Jackie, and Angela, I'm going to have you at the end just because, being an Aspire member, you kind of know what we do here. Yep. And so just what we do at the end here is, what is my takeaway? What am I going to take away from this call today? So we'll go Robin, and then Jackie, and then Angela, and then we'll quickly wrap it up. So Robin, what are you taking away today? Are you there?
Yeah, I just had to unmute real quick.
Okay.
I took away a few nuggets, but I think my biggest one was how harmful it is for me to stay in the left quadrant.
Yeah.
That's not beneficial. For me to always be compromising, and it doesn't help either situation. So how to stand strong, and how to accept that it's okay if people don't like me, or if it's okay, if people have a negative attitude about my boundaries.
I love it. And from one people pleaser to another, it's been a journey, but it's wonderful on the other side. So awesome.
It will
Jackie,
take practice.
What about you? Go ahead.
Thanks.
Jackie, what about you? What are you taking away today?
There's something that you had mentioned when responding to my question about tennising back and forth, and it's the comment that about being clear about writing the rules for engagement, and then just having the clarity of thought actually influences others. So that's an interesting phenomenon, for me, and I like. It's consistent with other similar things that I am learning about, getting clarity affects your behavior, which affects other people.
Yes.
So that's my nugget for today.
Excellent. And Angela, we'll wrap up with you. What are you taking away today?
When I was controlling the situation, I thought I would just have to completely just let go, and that felt really out of control to me. So I like knowing that I can baby step it. And that really helped me.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all for being on the call today. I'm going to place the recording of our call on the Stressful Relationships page so that you can take a look at the model anytime you want, although I know you all have handouts, and I just want to appreciate your participation today. I think it was an excellent call. It's an excellent topic, and there's more to it, but I think we covered tons in an hour, so really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful holiday. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.